My name is Dr. Jacob Gusha. We want to discuss rangeland management. Rangeland management involves applying the principles of field management, which include grazing, rotational grazing, rotational resting, controlling the top hamber removal, as well as making sure that stocking density and stock numbers are also controlled. So you'd find out that when we are talking about rotational grazing, we want our farmers to apply the principles of field management through making sure that we have got adequate paddocks. For example, if you have got a herd, probably you would need 3-4 paddocks that are small in size, and that enables you to make sure that there is no selective grazing. And you also make sure that you rotate. In terms of rotating, you allow the grass to rest, and if you offer the grass adequate resting period, then they can actually be able to seed. You know, grasses, they are surviving, they live, and in that sense, it means they can actually become sick, and they can also die. So in terms of trying to make sure that you don't allow your grass species to become sick and die and become extinct, you have to give them ample time to reproduce. In reproducing, they then produce the seed that becomes another plant for the coming future. So in terms of that, you will be enabling your rangeland to maintain certain grass species that are palatable, because animals tend to favor palatable species. And if you allow your animals to graze in a very large paddock, then they will be actually picking up those grass species that are palatable, that are nutritious, that are easily digestible. And if they are picking those, they tend to overgraze them and leading to extinction of those grasses. So you need to make sure that you apply the principle of rotational grazing and resting. Then you make sure that your stocking density is very important. What are we saying if you are talking about stocking density? We are saying how many animals per unit area. The larger the number, you are then probably applying what we call short duration, high stocking density. So you've got a lot of animals, but they are allowed to stay in a piece of land over a very short time. That enables them to graze everything and almost harvest everything, but also without actually selecting those species that are palatable. So almost all the species tend to be eaten. After that, you remove the animal to the next paddock. That is very critical. Then you also need to make sure that you remove top hamber. If there is top hamber, what do we mean by top hamber? We are saying during the onset of rains, there are certain grass species that we have actually piled up in your rangelands that stays for more than a year, probably representing the previous year grass species that are there. That's what we call top hamber. It needs to be removed because sometimes animals, they are not going to eat it anymore, and it is going to shield grass species that will be germinating, and that's actually affecting the rate of germination of new grass and also coming up of new regrowth of the grass that is there. So you need to make sure that you remove the top hamber. That's what we call top hamber removal. Then also for rangeland management, you need to make sure that the bushes, bush encroachment, you remove all the bushes. You try to make sure that you remove the bushes. The bushes, they tend to compete with the grasses in terms of nutrients, in terms of also water. So removal of bushes should be done probably during the winter period. Farmers should make sure that they reduce the number of bushes and tree population in their pastures to try and make sure that you also enable biomass, herbaceous species to multiply and grow. If some of the bushes, they tend to be poisonous, for example, if you talk of Lantana camara, if you talk of Dicapitilium cymosum, which are poisonous species, which end up actually affecting the grazing animals if they consume those species. So you need to make sure that when you are doing bush control in your paddocks, you remove those species that are poisonous, because they don't add value to your rangeland, but they actually put your animals at a risk if they are consumed. then you also need to make sure that you apply the principles of veld reinforcement. Veld reinforcement, it entails that you then have to make sure that you add some forage legumes in your pastures, in your rangeland, in your natural rangelands, to try and make sure that you bring in forage legumes like ceratro, fine stem stylo, the desmodium incinatum, which is the silver leaf desmodium, the green leaf desmodium. Those are some of the species that you should grow in your rangeland. Why? Because legumes, they tend to have deep roots. Those roots, they can actually harvest water from a distance. That enables them to start growing as soon as the end of winter period, winter season ends. So as early as August, you start seeing that most legumes, they begin to sprout up, and also increasing some green herbage. So animals that will be grazing such paddocks, they then have to get the green herbage coming from the legumes and the dry grasses that are almost like balancing the nutrition, because the grass provide the energy. These ones will also be high in nutrients, in nitrogen. That's actually providing that. Also, most forage legumes, they have got another important role to play in terms of fixing the atmospheric nitrogen into the soil. If that happens, then we are likely to have a lot of nutrients, a lot of nitrogen that is coming into the soil, and that nitrogen is then going to be utilized by the growing grass. And if the nitrogen is used by the growing grass, it then improves the quality of the grasses. So you need to make sure that you practice veld reinforcement through growing forage legumes, or planting even what we call browse legumes, the Acacia angostissima, the Calliandra calothysus, the Leucina pallida. There are so many species that you can actually grow in your pastures. Those, they also help to try and make sure that they fix the atmospheric nitrogen, atmospheric potash, atmospheric phosphorus into the soil, which is then actually going to be absorbed by the growing grasses, and thus improving the quality of your rangeland. You would find out that 90% of your animals' requirement should come from the rangeland if you are going to be profitable in ranching and cattle production. So you would find out that if you reinforce your rangelands, definitely the output per hectare is going to increase. The quality of herbage is going to increase. So like I indicated, that the forages that you are going, the browse legumes and the forage legumes that you are going to grow in your rangeland, they are going to fix the atmospheric nitrogen, atmospheric potash, atmospheric phosphorus into the soil. That's actually improving the soil quality. That's improving the quality of grasses as well that are going to grow there. So if you are going to do that, you are going to increase the output per hectare. If you are going to harvest the forages and the legumes from your pastures, you can actually use them for winter supplementation. Because apart from buying mabiko and other protein sources, you can actually produce your fodder from Leucina pallida leaves, Leucina pallida meal, Leucina leucocephala leaves, Acacia angostissima, Calliandra calothysus. Those are forage legumes that you can harvest and make sure that you can give your animal a kg per day, and you would see your animals doing very well. And we have done that as a way of supplementing the rangeland. So also another important factor that you may also have to make sure that you apply in your rangeland, you have to make sure that you have got your paddocks that may not be grazed, but you just have to harvest, practicing zero grazing, making sure that as early as February you begin to harvest good quality grass that you can conserve as hay or conserve as silage. But if you are going to harvest in February, then you make sure that every 4 weeks you continue to harvest. That way you are going to make sure that you are conserving a high quality fodder that is digestible, that is going to be able to provide the animals all the nutrients that are required, and it is highly digestible. And that's very critical to make sure that farmers, they don't harvest biomass during the August period, because if you are going to do that in August, it's not going to give you value for your money, because most of the roughage that you are going to be getting is highly lignified, poor quality, which is not going to be digestible. It's not going to provide the nutrients that you require. So it's very critical to manage your rangelands in such a way that it enables you to harvest good quality fodder. It enables you to have good quality fodder which is going to be taken by your animals. So that's the importance of rangeland, because 90% of all your animals' requirement should come from the rangeland if you are going to be a profitable beef producer in Zimbabwe. Winter supplementation involves providing animals with nutrients that are in deficient supply during the dry season of the year. Like I once alluded in our previous episodes, that in Zimbabwe we normally have rains for 4 months, which is from November up to probably from November up to mid-March. But our rangelands quality and quantity of fodder tend to fluctuate in response to the availability of rain. So in Zimbabwe, we have seen that in as early as end of February, we begin to see that our rangeland becomes much more poor in terms of quality, in terms of nutrients that are required for animal production. That is the protein, the energy supplies, minerals and vitamins. So you would find out that our animals from that period up to end of November, they will be deteriorating in terms of quality. So it is very critical and very important to make sure that at the end of February, beginning of March, farmers, they begin to supplement their animals with a protein diet, with a protein supplement, especially if they can mix salt and some protein sources like mabiko, probably 1-to-1. You can actually start giving your animals salt and mabiko in March, April, May, June. What you just need to avoid is to make sure that you give it as wet, because if the mabiko and salt 1-to-1 ratio is wet, then definitely you are likely to poison the animals. So in doing so, you need to make sure that you allow your animals to lick salt and mabiko 1-to-1 ratio from that end of March up to probably May. Then in May, after doing pregnant diagnosis and also weaning up your nursing cows, you have to make sure that you group them, the weaners in their own group, the cows which are in most cases, most of them, they will be pregnant by that time, and those that are dry, that are empty, they need to be separated. After that separation, you find out that those categories need to be supplied with different nutrients. Sometimes the energy quality, if you are looking at the rangeland behind me, you'll see that there is a lot of grass, but the grass is brown in color. We call it standing hay. Standing hay, it's more lignified. It's actually more structural carbohydrates, which are not easily digestible. They need a lot of time for them to be digested or to be degraded in the rumen. And even if after degradation, very little nutrients are made available to the animal, and the animal tends to eat its own body. By eating its own back, they become, they lose condition. You start seeing ribs being pronounced, being seen clearly on the animal, the body condition deteriorating from in a scale of 5 probably to 2 to 2.5 or even lower. If that happens, you would find out that those animals that are in a poor body condition score, they tend to stop even cycling sometimes. So we end up having what we call nutritional anestrus, which is the absence of estrus cycle because nutrients are not available. The animal is not getting adequate nutrients. Those that are pregnant, they tend also to have problems because sometimes the fetus that is supposed to be supplied with nutrients for it to grow well, is not going to get all the nutrients that are required. Then we end up having animals sometimes aborting, sometimes producing or calving down calves that are weaklings that are not likely to survive properly. Or else the animal condition continues to deteriorate until we end up with animals that are going to succumb to October cold, which normally is associated with the onset of rains. Because in October, the onset of rains, if animals were not supplemented, they will be in a very poor body condition score. Sometimes the rangelands will be poor to such an extent that you don't have adequate biomass for them to graze. In the absence of biomass to graze, it means the rumen cannot provide the heat source, and sometimes the rumen is empty. And if it is empty, animals tend to succumb to that cold weather, which leads to poverty death, which leads to pneumonia, and we lose a lot of animals during that period of the year. So if farmers are going to make money out of cattle production, in our concept of Mombe Kurima Mari, farmers should make sure that they supplement animals with a protein source. Then they continue in June, July, those that are pregnant, probably they would need a protein and a bit of energy source so they can mix grain, spent grain and other byproducts that they can get from the industry, to make sure that they can actually cushion their animals and maintain a body condition which is between 2.5 in a scale of 5. If that happens, you would find out that we are going to have animals that are going to grow at a faster rate, and you end up having animals that can be able to start cycling at around 18 months. But if you don't supplement your heifers that have been that were weaned during the May period and not supplemented throughout the season, they tend to deteriorate in terms of their body condition, but at the same time the rate of growth is going to be much more slower. And if they have got a much more slower rate of growth, they won't be able to be bred within 1.5 years, but you have to wait probably for 2 years, for 36 months for them to start breeding. If that happens, it means we are losing out in terms of what we are supposed to be getting. We expect an animal to make sure that it calves down at around 27 months and continues to give you a calf every year. If it gives you a calf every year, that's the profitability of cattle production, and farmers can then be able to make money out of the beef industry. There are a number of common mistakes that are normally made by farmers or rangers. And if they want to be successful in beef ranching or beef production, definitely they need to embrace the following advice. 1, you need to make sure that animals are dipped regularly, or they are supposed to be dipped once every month, once every week during the rain season, and once every 2 weeks during the dry season. But currently, with the outbreak of January disease, farmers have been advised to make sure that throughout the year they do a weekly dipping, which is very critical. Why? Because if you don't do a weekly dipping, you are likely to run into problems with tick-borne diseases. Tick-borne diseases include heartwater, red water, and the January disease that I once alluded to. So make sure that you dip your animals, and make sure that if you are going to be dipping your animals, you need to rotate some of the drugs, because if you are going to stick to one acaricide, your ticks are likely to develop what we call drug resistance. If that happens, then you are going to have those problematic ticks causing high chances of disease incidences in your head. And you also need to make sure that your dipping program, if you are going to use a plunge, you have to make sure that you stick to the recommendation, the dose rate, and also the application rate on an animal. You need to make sure that you are sticking to those application rates. If you don't do that, you are likely to also have problems. So dipping is a very important management thing that should be done. It's a common mistake to most farmers. Those cell phone farmers, they are not always available at the farm to make sure that when those activities are done, they are there to make sure that they help their workers to make sure that they do the correct calibration of their water dilution. So you need to be available when you are undertaking those activities. The second important thing that you should always do is to make sure that you keep correct records. Correct records involves making sure that you are doing the ear tagging, you are doing the branding, and doing that, make sure that you also indicate the dam's name, the sire's name. If you don't do that, then you are likely to end up actually mixing or breeding animals that are related. That's actually the beginning of what we call inbreeding. And if inbreeding happens, definitely you are likely to lose, because inbreeding have got some effects that are that lowers the rate of growth, that removes hybrid vigor, that also reduces the resistance to diseases and drought tolerant of animals. So if you want to be successful, make sure that you also make sure that you have got correct records. Supplementation, I have mentioned the importance of supplementation, and it should be done to make sure that during the whole year there is always a supplement to address deficiencies in the nutrition of your animals. That will enable your animals to maintain condition, to grow at a profitable rate. Because if you want to be profitable in farming, then that slogan yekuti mombe haifurirwi should actually be thrown away. I know matete gureda iti mombe haifurirwi kana one mombe, just let it go and graze. But that is not for profit. If you want to be profitable in this industry, you need to supplement them. Give them chivako mabiko mineral supplement. Give them protein supplement during the dry season, mineral supplement during the rain season. All the time, vitamin supplementation needs to be provided. So get to appreciate the beef calendar. Get to talk to your nutritionist. Get to talk to your vet extension workers, vet doctors. They will give you advice. Then the other important thing is to make sure that you vaccinate for all diseases that are known to be prevalent in your area. If it is known that there is anthrax, there is blackleg, there is 3-day stiff sickness, there is brucella, then you need to make sure that those are vaccinated and you don't have chances, you don't take chances. If you take chances, then obviously you are playing with your life, because profitability in beef industry is about making sure that you get a calf every year. Then also make sure that you have got at least a first aid kit at the farm to try and make sure that in the event that an animal is not well, then you can easily call a vet to come and help. And don't actually timber with your animals by just trying to inject different drugs on your animals. Ask a person who is trained to do that to come at the farm and inject whatever is supposed to be injected. Give correct advice. Probably once in 3 months, once in 2 months, you need to invite a vet doctor to your farm so that the vet doctor can actually do a thorough investigation on your animals. Breeding soundness evaluation, pregnant diagnosis, those things are very critical. Weaning is very critical to make sure that you don't actually stress the animals during the dry season. So you'd find out that farmers, some of them, they don't actually take those advice. They just do farming as if they don't want to make money. But farming cattle or ranching is actually a business, just like how OK and other big supermarkets are also run. If you run it well, definitely you make money from the beef industry. The diet of what is being eaten by the animal is very critical. So let us try to embrace those important issues. Disease treatment, diet of the animal, dipping is critical. If those things are done, it's deworming. Deworming should be done regularly, probably 3 times a year. I normally recommend that as the animal are entering the dry season, you come in with a broad spectrum to destroy all the internal parasites. As the season is the rain season is beginning to come in October, you also come in with a broad spectrum. In February, probably you need a specific, if your animals are having access to water from the pools that is dirty, probably worms, snails would have actually contributed to your liver flux. So you'd want to control the liver flux. So those 4 Ds, the diet of the animal, the dipping your animal, dosing your animals, and making sure that the animals are always you control the disease aspect. Those things is very critical for farmers. If you take that, embrace that advice, definitely you are likely to make money from the beef industry.